So you want to learn how to sprint, but you don't know how. I got you. Now, this isn't 100% beginner friendly, but I encourage you to at least try. Today, I'm going to teach you how to build an actor component that you can add to any character so that they can sprint until their stamina runs out, and once their stamina runs out, they'll start walking again. If you want to take the lazy route and just import the project files into your game project, I'm going to leave the project files in the description. And just as a friendly reminder, I will never charge anyone for these projects that I'm doing here on my channel. For every tutorial, the project files will be in the description of the video for free. I'm going to be using Unreal Engine version 5.6 for this tutorial. I advise you to do the same. So now that we got those disclaimers out the way, let's get to it. Open up your content drawer, right click to create a new folder and name this folder components. Open up the folder you just created, right click, go to blueprint class, and then go to actor component. You're going to click on that and we're going to name this BPC_sprint. The next thing we're going to do is open up our sprint component and we're going to create some variables. The first one is going to be can sprint, which is going to be type boolean. The second one is going to be is sprinting, which is also going to be type boolean. And the third one is going to be stamina, which is going to be type float. Compile, save, and then set the stamina's default value to 100. Compile and save again just to be safe, and then go back to your content drawer. Find an empty space, right click, and create a new folder. We're going to name this folder UI. Open up that folder, right click, go to user interface, click on widget blueprint, and then click on user widget, and we're going to name this WBP_stamina bar. Open up your widget blueprint, drop in a canvas panel, and then drop in a progress bar. Rename your progress bar stamina bar and make sure is variable is checked. Place the stamina bar's anchors in your desired location and play with the size X and size Y values to get your desired size. Set the percent on the progress bar to 0.5 so that you can see the color. Don't worry, this is only for reference. And now that you can see color, you could change the color to your progress bar to whatever color you desire. We're going to save that and then we're going to open our character blueprint. Find an empty space in your event graph, right click, and then search for event begin play. Drag off of begin play and search for create widget. And in widget class, you're going to search for the stamina bar widget that you created earlier. Dragging off the return value of the widget, we're going to add this widget to the viewport. And if we hit play, we'll be able to see the widget on our screen. However, the widget doesn't reflect the value of the player's actual stamina, but instead reflects the value that we set in the widget blueprint. So we're going to fix that. And to fix that, we're going to go back to the widget blueprint and click on this little button that's next to the percent value in the progress bar setting. Click on create binding, and then we're going to rename our function. I'm going to name mine bind stamina bar, and then you got to make a little bit of space here, go back to the event graph and delete everything except event construct. From event construct, you're going to drag off and get a sequence, and from the then zero of the sequence, you're going to cast to your player character blueprint. From the object of the character blueprint, you're going to drag off and get the player character, and then we're going to promote the player character blueprint into a variable so that we have a reference to the character inside the stamina widget. And we'll call this reference player ref. Going back to where we bound the stamina bar, we're going to grab the player ref and drag it onto the event graph. From the player ref, we're going to get our BPC sprint component. But before we're able to get the component, we have to actually add the component to the player character. So to do that, we're going to go back to the player character, go to the component section and click add, search for BPC sprint, and then click on it to add it to the player character. Hit enter, compile and save, and then go back to the widget. And by widget, I mean stamina bar. So when you get to the event graph, drag off a player ref, get your BPC sprint. From BPC sprint, you're going to drag off and get your stamina. From stamina, you're going to get a divide node and you're going to divide the stamina by 100. Connect the divide to the return node, compile and save, and now when we hit play, you'll be able to see that the stamina bar is successfully bound to the actual stamina of the player. The next thing we're going to do is go back to the player character blueprint and create a new variable called isMoving, and this is going to be type boolean. And the reason why we're creating this variable is so that we could prevent the sprint from draining when the character is not moving. So on the event graph, we're going to find the movement input, and then we're going to set isMoving to true after the move function is called. And on completed, we're going to set isMoving to false. After we do that, we're going to go back to our sprint component, which is BPC sprint, and we're going to create some functions. The first function we're going to create is going to be called increase stamina. And then obviously the next one is going to be decreased stamina. The next one is stamina drain. After that is stamina recovery. And then there's stop stamina drain. And then after that is stop stamina recovery. And then the next one is set walk speed. After that is set sprint speed. After that is start sprint. And after that is stop sprint. And finally, the last function we're going to create is check stamina. So now that we have our functions created, we have to actually build them. But before we can do that, we got to get a reference to the player character. So we go back to the event graph in the component, move the event tick above the begin play because we're going to use that later. And then we're going to right click to get our player character. And from the return value, we're going to cast to our player character blueprint like we did before. And again, we're going to promote our character blueprint into a variable and name it player ref so that we have a reference to our player. Now we can set up the check stamina function. So the first thing we do is we drag our player reference into the event graph and get our player reference. From player reference, we're going to drag off and we're going to get the isMoving variable we created in the player blueprint. Drag off of isMoving and get an and boolean. Get your stamina by dragging your stamina variable onto the event graph. And from stamina, you want to get a greater than node and connect it to the and boolean. And from the and boolean, we'll get a branch and connect the branch to the execution of the function. This is how we're going to tell the game to decide whether or not the character can sprint or can't sprint. The next thing you're going to do is set can sprint at both true and false of the branch. And for true, we're going to set can sprint to true. And for false, we're going to set can sprint to false. And now that we have that done, we can compile, save, and move on to the next function. So go to the increase stamina function and click on the execution node. In the details panel of the function, we're going to add an input. We're going to name this input amount to add, and it's going to be type float. Next, we're going to get our stamina. From stamina, we're going to get an add node, and then we're going to connect our input to the bottom pin of the add node. From the add node, we're going to get a clamp type float and set the maximum value of the float to 100. We're then going to set our stamina by dragging it on top of the execution node of the function and then connecting the return value of the clamp to the set stamina node. For the decrease stamina function, we do the exact same thing, but we're using subtraction instead of addition. So again, we click on the execution node to add an input. It'll be type float and we'll name it amount to subtract. So again, we'll get our stamina. From stamina, we'll get our subtract node and we'll connect the amount to subtract to the bottom pin of the subtract node. From the subtract node, we'll get another clamp type float and then we'll set the maximum value of the float to 100. Set the stamina again by dragging the stamina variable over the execution pin of the function and then grab the return value of the float and connect it to the set stamina node. So now that we have that done, it's time to set up the stamina drain. To do that, we have to call the decrease stamina function. So you could call that function by dragging it onto the event graph. For the amount to subtract, you can add your desired amount. From the decrease stamina function, you're going to drag off and search for set timer by function name. Double click on your stamina drain function and Control C to copy and then go into the function name and Control V to paste. For time, put in your desired amount and make sure that looping is set to true, and you can do that by clicking the checkbox. Take the return value of the set timer by function name and promote it to a variable and name it stamina drain loop. Next, we're going to create our stamina recovery function, which is the same thing as the stamina drain function, but we're using the increase stamina node as opposed to the decrease stamina node. So again, we're going to call our increase stamina function by dragging it onto the event graph and connecting it to the execution pin, add in the desired amount for amount to add, drag off, and call set timer by function name. Double click on stamina recovery, Control V to copy, and then Control V in the function name to paste. Put in your desired time, set looping to true by clicking on the checkbox, and again, get your return value and promote it to a variable, and we're going to name this stamina recovery loop. And now that we've done that, we're going to get into the real meat and potatoes of this tutorial, which is setting up the actual sprint function. But before we do that, we got to do some testing. So go back to your character blueprint and find an empty space on the event graph. Right click and search for E key. And usually the 0 key is going to be the first thing that pops up. So click on that, bring it onto the event graph, and then we're going to copy and paste it a few times. So we're going to copy it and we're going to paste it 3 times so that we have 4 little input nodes here. The next thing you want to do is highlight the first one, click on the keyboard icon in the details panel, and then press the number 1 on your keyboard to create a key binding. Repeat the same process for the rest rest of them using different keys for each one. To keep it simple, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, and 4. The next thing you're going to do is grab your sprint component and drag it onto the event graph. And from your sprint component, you're going to start calling some functions. So the first one is going to be stamina drain. Connect stamina drain to the 1. And then from BPC sprint, you're going to call stop stamina drain and connect it to the 2. Next, you're going to get stamina recovery and connect it to the 3. And then lastly, you're going to get stop stamina recovery and connect it to the 4. Now, before we start testing, we have to create our stop functions for the stamina drain and stamina recovery, but this will only take about 30 seconds. So go back to your sprint component, open up the stop stamina drain function, and drag the stamina drain loop variable that we created earlier onto the event graph. From stamina drain loop, search for clear and invalidate timer by handle and connect the execution pin to that node. Now we're going to do the same thing for the stop stamina recovery function. Stop stamina recovery loop onto the event graph, drag off of it, clear and invalidate timer by handle, and connect the execution pin to that node. And now that we have that done, we can finally do some testing. So compile, save, and hit play. Now when we hit play and press the 1 key, you'll see that the stamina is going to start to drain. And if you hit the 2 key, the stamina drain will stop. After that, you can hit the 3 key and you'll see that the stamina will start to recover. And if you hit the 4 key, the stamina recovery will stop. And now that we see everything working, we could close the editor and move on to the next part. The next thing we're going to do is set up the movement speeds for both walking and sprinting. So we're going to go to the set walk speed function and drag in our player reference. From our player reference, we're going to get our character's movement component, and then from the movement component, we're going to get set max walk speed. Connect the execution pin to the set max walk speed node and set the max walk speed to 250. Also, don't forget to go to your player character blueprint, click on the movement component, and set the max walk speed to 250 there as well. This makes sure that the default speed that your character will move at is 250. Now we got to set up our sprint speed function, and to save some time, we're just going to copy everything we see here and we're going to paste it into the set sprint speed function. Connect the execution pin to the set max walk speed node and set the max walk speed to 500. Now we're going to set up an input to actually start sprinting. So go back to your player character's blueprint, right click on the event graph and search for left shift. Now you should use an input action, but for the sake of the tutorial, we're just going to use left shift for now. So get your sprint component and drag it onto the event graph. And for now, just so we can see what's going on, we're going to call set sprint speed off of press and set walk speed off of released. So when we press play, we can see that the regular walk speed is set at 250, and then when we hit left shift, the speed will go up to 500, and then when it's released, it'll go back to 250, but the stamina is not draining or recovering, so we got to fix that. And don't worry, we're almost done here. So go back to your sprint component, and we're going to go to the start sprint function. Get the can sprint variable and drag it onto the event graph, and from can sprint, you're going to get a branch. Now from the branch on true, you want to call the set sprint speed function. And in the stop sprint function, you simply want to call the set walk speed function. Now back to the player character blueprint, instead of calling set sprint and walk speed, we're going to call start sprint and stop sprint from the BPC sprint component. And again, if you hit play, you'll see that this is working perfectly fine. When you start, the regular walk speed will be 250, and then when you hit left shift, you'll start sprinting, etc., etc. Now we have to set up our stamina drain and stamina recovery. So we go back to the player character blueprint, get your isMoving variable and drag it onto the event graph. From isMoving, you want to get a branch and connect the start sprint to the branch. From your sprint component, you're going to want to call your stamina drain function and connect it to true on your branch. And then after stamina drain from your BPC sprint component, you want to call stop stamina recovery. And then from your sprint component after stop sprint, you want to call your stop stamina drain. And after stop stamina drain from your sprint component, you're going to call your stamina recovery. From there, we're going to go back to our sprint component and then go to the check stamina function. And after can sprint is set to false, we're going to call our stop sprint function. All right, so we only have one thing left to do. So compile, save, close everything up except your stamina bar widget. All right, so in your stamina bar widget, in the animations panel, you're going to select the stamina bar, click the plus sign on the animation and type in fade. With the animation selected, we're going to click on the plus sign on add, and then we're going to go up to the stamina bar and click on that. Click on the plus sign on the stamina bar and look for render opacity. Go to the render opacity bar and set the value to 0. And then you're going to grab this little orange handle on the timeline and move it to 2 seconds, and then set the render opacity to 1. Last step is to go to the event graph of your stamina widget, grab your fade animation from the variables tab, and drag it onto the event graph. From your fade, you're going to get play animation and connect it to the then 1 of the sequence. And that is literally it. It is done. Now we can go to the plane editor and check if everything we built is working perfectly. So finally, we press play, and when we walk normally, again, it's 250. When we sprint, the stamina bar will drain, and when we stop sprinting, the stamina bar will start to recover. And if the stamina bar is empty, the sprinting will be disabled until enough stamina is recovered to start sprinting again. And just like that, we're done. Alright, so if this was helpful, go ahead and like and subscribe, hit the notification bell for more tutorials, and if you have any suggestions for the next video, feel free to leave it in the comments.